Good evening to you all. Warm welcome to ETV News. I'm Grum Tariku. Ethiopia has asked the UNESCO and WHO to expose the truth about TPLF-led destructions in Amhara and Afar regions. Director General for International Organizations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Yosef Kasai, today held discussions with the heads of Ethiopian Office of UNESCO, Dr. Yomiko Yokozeki, and WHO, Dr. Brima Sambo. During the discussions, the Director General expressed the concerns of the government of Ethiopia over the reluctance of these agencies in revealing the damage caused by the TPLF terrorist group in Tigray, Amhara, and Afar regional states on the country's cultural heritage and health facilities. The destruction and looting of properties, including economic, social, and cultural assets by the TPLF, have been a source of serious concern, said the Director General, adding that the failure by the international community to condemn these terrorist acts emboldened TPLF to cause further plunder and damages. He also said that Ethiopia, as a founding member of the United Nations, has long-standing relations with all agencies of the organization and thus expects these agencies to undertake their activities impartially and speak out publicly about the destructions caused by the terrorist group. The heads of the two organizations have pledged to take Ethiopia's concerns seriously, given their primary responsibilities in protecting cultural sites and the well-being of the people of Ethiopia, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Ambassador Dina Mufti, says Ethiopia's and Ethiopian friends are engaged in moral, financial, and other diplomatic activities supporting the sweeping reforms being undertaken across the nation. In a press briefing he gave today, he added that the #NoMore movement in various countries has also been strengthened. The spokesperson has disclosed that double standard is still being observed by some international media in Western countries about the historical sites destructions, millions of starvation, and internally displaced peoples in Amhara and Afar regions. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia has in addition gripped the decision of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva to set a special session on Ethiopia on Friday. The ministry believes that it is a politically motivated move that deliberately ignored the Ethiopian government's commitment that welcomed the findings of UNHRC Joint Investigation Report and established a high-level inter-ministerial task force to implement the recommendations therein. Now, to tell us more on these issues, we are now joined live on the phone by Dina Mufti, spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia. Ambassador Dina, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me as well.
Okay, it is noted that Ethiopia has called on members of the UN Human Rights Council to categorically reject and vote against the special session which more than 52 world countries signed for. So my question is, with this regard, is there any African nation that can participate in this meeting? What is the government's observation and expectations of this meeting?
Well, basically, this is a type of a session which is uncalled for. It is a session that is not supposed to be taught about because, as you have said it in your news presentations, Ethiopia had been cooperative with the United Nations Human Rights Council and the investigation that has come in collaboration with the pertinent authority in Ethiopia as well. And Ethiopia was ready, despite all the misgivings, to implement all those decisions. And while Ethiopia is doing this in good faith, it won't be appropriate for the EU to call for such a session, which is simply a session that is called to put pressure on Ethiopia. It's illegal, it's unjust, it's morally wrong as well, and politically not right. And so as far as your question is concerned, so far I don't see the African countries that have agreed to it, but I see all others those who have already called for this and who have agreed, perhaps are other countries other than the African countries. African countries, so far, I don't see a single African country in this list.
Okay, Ambassador Dina. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed recently said that Africa, which is a continent of around 1.3 billion people, needs a permanent voice and seat at the UN Security Council. In relation to this, Ambassador, was there any African nation that says Ethiopia deserves a pat on the back for such an idea and gave a response?
We hope that will be the case. We hope the African countries will make their voices to be loudly heard. With regard to the UN representation, the representations of the African countries in the UN Security Council, this is the issue that had been out there for years. The UN restructuring has been an agenda that hopefully nowadays time has come for. Otherwise, it won't be augur well for Africans to have an administration or an organization in the name of the international communities that should decide on their fate. And the Africans should be there. Africans should be represented properly. And the restructuring of the United Nations Security Council is actually a long overdue issue.
Okay, Ambassador Dina, thank you very much for your time.
You are welcome. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
That was Ambassador Dina Mufti, spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In a related development, UNESCO remained unperturbed and buried its head in the sand when Lalibela discredited Redwan Hussein tweeted. The political and economic diplomacy state minister added that WHO is dead for two apparent reasons when thousands of health facilities ransacked. EU seems busy contriving resolution against Ethiopia in Geneva. Time for prowess from friends of Ethiopia, he has tweeted. African leaders are elevating the issue of permanent seat for the continent at the UN Security Council to a top agenda. The much coveted and decisive permanent seat helps the continent float its agenda to the floors of the global body. It also helps effectively stop undue arm twisting and third-party intervention by those in the West with veto power. Take a look.
Today's UN is dominated by non-democracies for non-democracies. Of course it's failing. Your challenge: design the right multilateral institution for the 21st century. Thank you.
This is a 2017 remark at the Oxford University by Professor Anne Bayafiski, an international lawyer, scholar and human rights as well as equality activist. The fact that the UN is a failing system is not the sole view of Professor Bayafiski, but many, particularly in the global south, share this view. For instance, while Ethiopia is an African state and a co-founder of League of Nations, it was mistreated at the League this way back in 1937, when Italy committed an aggression on sovereign soil and Emperor Haile Selassie cried foul.
In the shadows of the press gallery, Italian newspapermen are ready for an outbreak against the emperor whose country their country has taken, waiting for his first word.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le...
Trying to quell the disturbance, lights turned out. Again, lights out. The disturbers ejected, arrested, and he is able to make his appeal.
Although the UN Charter was designed for a fair and equal treatment of its member states, some are receiving absolutely unfair treatment and misrepresentations at the global giant, the United Nations. History illustrates this with its great records of how the UN is accommodating unilateralism, as the US invaded Iraq in 2007, imposed 60-year blockade against Cuba, caused over 30,000 deaths in Venezuela between 2017 and 2018, caused this era's greatest sufferings and destruction in Syria, Libya, Somalia, Afghanistan, Sudan, Ethiopia, and in many other countries in the global south. This hegemony of unilateralism in the UN system by certain superpowers in the global system is a proof that the UN is a failing system, and that is why many African leaders have been asking for the permanent representation of the continent at the UN Security Council. In 2016, addressing the 26th African Union Summit, late Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe resonated the same idea. He called for a reformed UN Security Council.
The bosses in the Security Council say you shall never have the powers that we have as permanent members. And we have asked and asked and asked and asked and asked. Reform the Security Council.
Mugabe also recommended that African states be treated equally at the UN as a denominator for its survival.
If the United Nations is to survive, we must be equal members of it.
And lately, many African states have echoed the continent's strong desire to have equal and functional representation at the UN Security Council.
On the 75th anniversary of the UN, we repeat our call for greater representation of African countries on the Security Council, and that this be taken up with urgency at the intergovernmental negotiations. It is only through a reformed and inclusive UN Security Council that we will be able to collectively resolve some of the world's most protracted conflicts.
Nigeria supports the expansion of the United Nations Security Council to reflect the diversity and dynamics of the 21st century. Africa deserves permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council.
How about a little bit of satire comedy now, alongside the propaganda battle against the US-led imperialist war of aggression and Western media bias? Some Ethiopians have come up with powerful satire comedy. The following piece is a funny depiction, all shot in Addis, by the famous Jamie Shaw. Take a look.
Breaking news, and now the headlines. The rebels have hijacked one of the Ethiopian Airlines planes and have crushed it right into the African Union building you see behind me. The birthplace for the Pan-Africanism has become the place for the rebels' terrorism. The rebels are not paying me enough. So far, there are no survivors. Eyewitnesses testify the situation was so chaotic, they have seen His Majesty Haile Selassie's statue running for his life. This is surely the African version of September 9/11. The next step is expected to be the invasion of Ethiopia, just like Afghanistan, to once and for all stop this terrorism. On the other hand, the Chinese are furious. They are saying all this hard work, the African Union building, for nothing. Finally, before the Chinese evacuated, they said, "We love Ethiopians and Africans, but there is no free lunch or rice. Africa cannot even pay us in big supply of mice." BBC News, propagating lies and information to neo-colonize the next nation. BBC News, running out of lies, spies and rebel ties. Stay tuned and get screwed.
The TPLF cliques seem to leave a trail of destruction wherever they go. The looting and vandalizing of Wollo University in the Amhara region is the latest case in point. The graduation salon, assembly hall, and students' dining rooms of the university have totally been demolished by the TPLF gangs in the region. Haptama Shagre has more on this.
It is very difficult to even believe your eyes, seeing these massive destruction and massive looting practices, which are in clear violation of the international law committed by the TPLF cliques in Amhara region. The terrorist TPLF has demolished and looted all ICT infrastructure facilities of Wollo University in the region. Talking to TV, President of Wollo University, Mangasha Ayala, said the TPLF gangs are leaving a trail of destruction and looting at the university.
የተለያዩ ቢልዲንጎቻችንን ቢሮዎቻችንን በተለይ ደግሞ በብዙ ሚሊዮን 200-300 ሚሊዮን ብር አውጥተን የገነባነውን
The TPLF cliques have demolished and looted various buildings and offices in Wollo University. They have also destroyed and looted ICT infrastructure facilities worth 300 million baht. The TPLF mafias have also disposed of expensive materials when they failed to transport them into Tigray region. Our research laboratories and engineering workshops are seriously looted and damaged in our different campuses. In general, all our learning materials have been demolished by TPLF mafias, and the recently destructed materials are valued at 16 billion baht.
ብዙ ሀብት የሚጠይቁ ናቸው ስለዚህ ዩኒቨርሲቲያችን ከውጭ ሀገር ድረስ
The TPLF cliques have demolished and looted universities and higher institutions against the international law. But some Westerners and Europeans are not ready to condemn these devilish acts committed by TPLF.
Today, Ethiopia is making significant strides in transforming its political, social, and economic landscape.
ኢትዮጵያና ሕዝቦቿን ይባርክ። አመሰግናለሁ። የሆነው ቢከብደንም አልፈናል ግድ ለማሁን የኋላን ወደ ኋላ ጥለን እንጀምር አብረን ተማምለን
We as Ethiopians in the diaspora possess an extraordinary amount of goodwill, resources, and skill sets to help our country tackle the broad range of social, economic, and political problems we face today. And please don't forget that we need you. Every single Ethiopian is deserving and is worthy of a great education, access to clean water, and living a life without poverty. Remember about the people on the other side of our giving.
All time.
You are watching ETV News. An international campaign involving Ethiopians and Eritreans living in several parts of the world is underway with a view of getting Dr. Tedros Adhanom removed from his post as Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO. Coordinators of the campaign said Tedros Adhanom is covering up the atrocities against civilians and vandalism committed by the terrorist TPLF on hospitals and other health facilities in Ethiopia, misusing his position at the international organization, WHO. Democracy experts are also arguing in favor of this, asserting that he must be held accountable for his involvement in crimes against humanity.
As senior foreign advisor, I was well aware of the role of Tedros Adhanom in crimes against humanity committed by the Ethiopian government, in particular after 2012, when he became the third highest official in the government, as well as a member of the executive committee or the Politburo. And from 2012 to 2016, he was in a position of what is called senior or command responsibility, meaning that he had at least partial control over security forces and civil servants who were carrying out these crimes against humanity. And I also saw that during these years, he had involved himself in attempts to cover up several mass disasters in Ethiopia. He had tried to cover up a famine. He tried to cover up the failure of the poverty programs. He tried to cover up a massacre. He tried to cover up the arrest of journalists.
Colorful Cape Town is one of the most multiracial cities in the world. The city sits on South Africa's Cape Peninsula, where the waters of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans converge, and spectacular mountains tumble towards the sea. For decades, Cape Town has been buffeted too by the crosswinds of social upheaval. But just like those early ships, Cape Town had endured some of history's most turbulent waters and set course to an optimistic future. Cape Town's central area is situated in the City Bowl. This amphitheater-shaped area begins at the edge of Table Bay and is backed by the iconic 2-mile-long plateau of Table Mountain. Post-apartheid South Africa is often called the Rainbow Nation, and like a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, diversity, transformation, and creativity shines out from the city's downtown streets, from its businesses, from its very walls. So come and savor the colors, hope, and freedom of Cape Town.
In another development, Sudanese police fired tear gas canister to disperse hundreds of protesters who gathered outside the presidential palace in Khartoum to demand civilian rule. Witnesses said many Sudanese opposed to military rule regularly demonstrate to denounce the coup d'etat on October 25, led by the head of the army, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and to demand the handover of power to civilians. The people are stronger, or civilians is the people's choice, chanted protesters on Monday, waving Sudanese flags. According to witnesses, demonstrators were also marching in the eastern state of Kassala and Kadarif. Since the October 25 coup, over 40 protesters have been killed and hundreds injured, including by bullets, according to a pro-democracy doctors' union. On that day, General Burhan had most of the civilians who were running the country with him arrested, as reported by African News. Now, a reminder of the headlines.